Hey there, welcome back. We're going to get started today talking about text analysis, both of the data within a text and the metadata around a text. As you'll see with Tableau, ultimately, if you're going to do text analysis or any sort of visualization of text, um, you're going to have to pull in a data set that's been prepared elsewhere. There are some string operations that you can make use of, but I have to say that quite honestly, Tableau is not the best tool to work with texts. You really want to use something like R or Python, or even Excel, honestly. Like Excel has more tools for analyzing text than Tableau does. That's just not what it's meant for. However, once you do have your data set prepared and it's ready to go, then as you know, Tableau has some excellent tools for visualizing data in an interactive way, which oftentimes, particularly when you are looking at text-based sources, seeing it in different ways and making use of those tooltips and annotations is really essential. That can often be what really tells you the most about your data. So we're going to go through some visualizations about the State of the Union address. This is a corpus of addresses. It's the full transcript that's written by the speechwriters for presidents every year. It's delivered at the beginning of the year, and as you may or may not know, it's really this presidential address to the world, for what it's worth, that kind of says, this is where we're at as a country. This is our hopes going forward. This is the vision that I have. Right? These speeches are actually really, really fascinating. Once you do some like deeper text analysis into them, you can see some of the different styles come out and things like that. What we've done here is just started to touch that. We're looking for general trends in the speeches. We're looking for lexical density, which is a linguistic measure of how complex something is. We'll talk about that when we get there. And just kind of the overall tone and the overall trend. All right. So I'd like you to go out to the Tableau workbook and make sure to download it. The download button is right here. Just go ahead and download the workbook to your computer because we're going to be looking at these visualizations and kind of breaking them down. I'm not going to be walking you through any more of click on this and drag it over there. Rather, we're going to be looking at the breakdown and the organization and why the pills in that location work. All right. Okay, so go ahead, download that, and I'll meet you back here in a minute. All right, so go ahead and open up that workbook in Tableau, and you'll see a whole lot of different visualizations down here at the bottom. The data set that we're using for this, there's actually two data sets available for you on the course website. One has the first 500 words of every speech, and another has the first 250 words. I highly encourage you to use the one with the first 250 words because the one with 500 words will crash your computer. All right. So the way that you actually open up two instances of Tableau, and you can load in the data set into your own instance of Tableau. You won't be able to do that from the one that you downloaded from my website or my Tableau public site. Okay. So we're going to do three different things. We're going to look at how this data was processed. We're going to look at how visualizations about the data are made. And then we're going to look at how visualizations of the data. So the about the data is the metadata, of the data is the actual content. Okay, so In the first instance of Tableau, the one where you have opened it up on your computer and you don't have those visualizations, you should have the option to connect to the data set. Now, you are seeing right now why we're not going to do this one live because the data set is entirely too large. Okay, so go ahead and drag in your transcripts processed file. It's a Microsoft Excel file. You've done this a million times now. Drag your metrics over here because your metrics is the base table. It has the date, the year, the president, the title, the URL, all of that. And then drag your words and try to do an inner join. It should do it automatically. And it should automatically join on the date. Now, the date in this case is a string, which is going to be really important for us to consider as we're moving forward because we cannot change the date to a date data type. So you notice here that the way that it's joined is on the date. This is good. It can't actually join on the title because a lot of the titles are the same. It can't actually join on the president because obviously the presidents are the same. You know, Donald J. Trump appears twice, Barack Obama appears 8 times, so it wouldn't know how to join. So actually the only unique thing is the date, but this means that we have to keep the date as a string. Okay, so once you've loaded that in, the first thing I'd like you to do is to create a calculated field from the date. We're going to create a year. Because the State of the Union is only given once a year, this is kind of perfect. If we needed to keep the date, what we would do is just duplicate this column. And the way that you do that is just create calculated field and then don't do anything. Just, calc date is the date. And that would create the same, that would make a duplicated field. But for us, what we did was we created a calculated field by calling integer, because we wanted to specify that it was a number, left, and we wanted the left 4 characters of the date field here. So we wanted the years are all written out in the 4-character method. So we say int to make it an integer. The left 4 characters, pass it the date, pass it the number 4, and we've called it calc year because this is something that we've calculated. Okay, and then once you have that loaded up, go ahead and all the way to the right, you should have the words like all laid out. It should be words W1, words W2, W3. Select that, and then we're going to pivot it. I'll show you what that looks like in a second. All right, so if you go over here, you have words, and then all the way at W250, shift and click on that, and then right click and select pivot. Okay. And it'll take it a little while to calculate that. Once that finishes, go ahead and change the pivot field names, and the first one you change to offset, and the second one you'll change to single words, and it'll be obvious which one is which. Yeah. All right, so pivot field names, change this one to call it offset, and this one to call it single words. And I'll meet you back when that is done thinking. All right, and then your offset should look like this. It should be W100, whatever, and your single words should look like this. It should be just one single word. And what you see is that this has been pivoted and then joined to your data table. So each word is a unique row. It means that this data table is enormous. So it is super long. Every single word, even the thes and the ins and the ats, are their own row with the all of the metadata about that entire speech attached. Okay. One last thing that we're going to do is we're going to calculate the offset. And you can use this for quite a few things. We're only going to use it to get the first 5 words. Okay. So go to offset and then create calculated field, and then you're going to make it an integer because again we want our offset position to be a number. And then we're going to replace from our offset column the letter W with nothing, and then close your parentheses, all right? So int made it a number. We're going to replace everything in the offset column that's a W with nothing. Okay. And click OK, and then that'll give you all these numbers. You will also get one that is a word, and this is the 0 position. And if you come all the way down here, yes. So this should say ORD for you, and make it a 0 here. Okay. All right. And then you'll have the offset of all of the words. All right. Excellent. That's all the calculation that you need to do. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the graphs. All right. So the first question that we had was, what is the general trend in word length of these speeches over the years, right? So the way that we do that is we drag our calc gear to the columns because we want our columns going along the x-axis, and then the word count to the rows. And we just use the default there, and it should give you a line chart. If it doesn't give you a line chart, go here to the marks and select line, right? Now, there's a few things that we've done here. So the first is we took president to the tooltip. So we just took we took the dimension president and then dragged it onto the tooltip. And what that does is it automatically puts president into the tooltip. So when we hover over, we can see James K. Polk, which we might not be able to see otherwise. The other thing is that we've brought date into the tooltip. Just in case we wanted to somehow format the date and show, you know, this was the, whatever, this on this day. Yeah, on this day, this was the speech. Okay. So what the other thing that we did was we highlighted some key speeches. So I really wanted to call out Roosevelt's second Bill of Rights, right? And he gave this speech in his 1944 State of the Union address. And, you know, it's where he lays out that, like, the pursuit of happiness is an essential thing that everyone is entitled to, right? So the way you do that is you click on the data point or right-click on it, select Annotate, and then annotate that point, and then format your annotation the way that you want it to look, right? Okay. Excellent. The next one I wanted to highlight was Lyndon B. Johnson's War on Poverty. You know, this was also a really important speech. And finally, I wanted to annotate Gerald Ford's speech saying, you know, the State of the Union is not good. Just to highlight that, you know, we go in these cycles. We go in these cycles of hope to no hope. Now, one thing that would be interesting in addition to this is if you annotated each speech somehow saying, you know, this one is hopeful, this one is dismal, or something along those lines, and then did a sort of sentiment analysis, how hopeful or how dismal. There's some ways to do that in R. If you're really curious, I have another tutorial on how to walk you through that, and I'll point you to that after this. Okay. So make sure that when you're doing these annotations that you drag the actual annotation box off of the point and off of the other lines so you don't obstruct your own visualization. Okay. Another thing you might want to do is look into what was going on in 1974 with this very, very, very long speech by Nixon, because they are quite different from each other as these speeches go. Okay. The other thing that we did here was we added a trend line, and we got this trend line by going to Analytics, and then we selected Trend Line, and if you drag it over, you actually have to drag it over. We chose polynomial because there's kind of an interesting pattern going on here that, leading up to World War I, there's this this pretty steady increase and then this fall off. And then World War II, we see another increase. And recently, they've been much, much, much shorter, right? And this is just a really interesting way to kind of highlight that these things do have an overall pattern to them. Okay. Then go ahead and change your axes, format all of this, change your title, and rename your tab down here. Okay. All right, let's move on to our next question, which is about the unique words versus the total words. This is a little bit less common of a question to ask of a data set, but what it starts to get at is how content packed something is. So if a speech is very, very content heavy, the number of stop words or it, the, at, in is going to be very small. Now, presidential speeches are super interesting because they sit at this intersection between written prose and spoken colloquial language. They are speeches. They are not meant to be interrupted. They are monologic. They're really this particular format. So we have to compare this data set to itself. We can't necessarily compare it to traditional written documents or traditionally spoken documents because the ratio of unique to total words is going to be very, very different. Okay, so this was calculated based on the entire data set. Now, there's a problem with that. So this was the entire length of the speeches. And as you'll see, some of the speeches are much, much, much longer than others, like Taft and Roosevelt have some really long ones, but Wilson was a man of few words, right? So it's not necessarily fair to compare the unique words to the content words, or the unique words to the total words. But we do see something really interesting, particularly here with Taft, as he has almost as many unique words as Wilson has total words, which means that not only was Taft way more verbose, but he was also talking about either A, more specific topics, or B, he was packing more content into his speeches, right? Okay. So let's look at how we got here because this is a chart type that we haven't worked with before. So the first thing that we did was we brought president and the year up to the columns because not only did we want to break it up by year, but we also wanted to get these handy little lines of which president was president when, because unlike many people, I don't remember that Grover Cleveland was president until 1896. This is just not something that I know, and it's not something that's widely known. So it's really helpful to have the presidents up at the top. And the way that you get that is you have both presidents and year up at the top. All right. So let's go back to our data pane. And now we're going to drag the measure names down here. We're going to drag this over to color on our marks card, all right? And then here, go ahead and click Edit Filter. And you're going to get an option for all of the other columns. We only want, so select None, because we only want total words and unique words. Those are the only measure names that we want to work with. And the last thing that we're going to do is we're going to take the measure values and pull it up here to the rows. And once you pull the measure values to the rows, you may have a bar chart, you may not. If you don't have a bar chart, go ahead and force select bar chart. Okay. And you can change this to something else that you want, but then it actually gets kind of confusing to read. And now you should have this stacked bar chart. Okay. So remember, the key here is to drag the measure names to the color and then create the filter, and then drag the measure values to the rows. This will give you the median here. It actually doesn't matter because we've broken it up by both president and year. So each record is broken apart individually. So the fact that it's median should be no problem. All right. Congratulations. We are going to go ahead and clean up your axes, that kind of stuff. But we're going to move on to the sentences. All right, this is actually a really easy visualization. What we've done here is we have plotted the president and the median number of sentences. So on the rows, we have our president dimension, and on our columns, we have sentence count and the median number of sentences. The last thing that we did was we sorted by president, which you just click here, and then you can either do the least, which was John Adams, or the most, which was William Howard Taft. Excellent. All right, this one was really simple. Let's move on to the next one. The next one is much more complicated. Okay, so what's going on here is a ratio of the content words to the total words. And this is obviously related to the number of unique words. It's just a different way to visualize the result. Okay, so what we've done here is we've pulled in this no stops per words. And this was calculated by taking the number of non-stop words and dividing it by the total number of words in the speech. And it'll give you like sum or median or something. You actually want to click here on the down arrow and turn it into an attribute because we don't want it to perform any calculations on that. We just want it to give us a data point. Okay. Again, drag president and calc year up here. And what you're going to do is you're going to sort the presidents by the field calc year. And you're going to do it by, you want to do it by median year rather than sum, because sum doesn't actually make that much sense, but the median gives you the middle year that they were president and therefore puts them into order. So you want to do calc year and then the median. Okay. Excellent. And then this should pretty easily give you the circles. I think I had to force it into being circle, and then I increased the size quite a bit in order to make sure that it was visible in the final chart. Okay. So if you, what is this? It's exclusions. Oh, yes, that's the other thing. So there were a whole lot of null values here that were really, really throwing off the calculation. So any of the values that you see here, just go ahead and click on them and then click exclude in order to clean up this data set just a little bit. Okay. The last thing that we did was we created this average line. And this average line tells us the number of non-stop words per total words overall. And this allows us to see that in the beginning, they're way below average. And then as years go on, they become way over average, although some, go down here and there. All right. The way that we got that was we went over here to analytics, and then we just said, give me the average line. I pulled it in and I asked for the average line per table. If you did it per pane, what that would tell you would be the average for that president. So for each president, which is not what you want. Okay. That's that for the no stop words. Now we're going to go through and do some visualizations of the data, not about the data. Okay, we're going to do 3 different word clouds. The default visualization when you pull all these pills to their respective places is going to be a tree map. You're welcome to keep it as a tree map, that's fine, but we're going to do it as a word cloud. Okay. So go back to your data tab, and you're going to use the single words that you created earlier through your pivot. And you're going to drag, wait, before you touch your single words, the most important thing is to filter by president. So drag president here over to the filter, and then pick your presidents. If you don't do this, it will crash Tableau, I promise you, and you don't want that. So go ahead, pick your president, and then I dragged the single words pill, and then I asked for the top 100 words because I didn't want all of the words. This is not so great because our data set only has 250 words, but it gives you a first view into how to do this kind of work. Okay. Once you have your filter set, go ahead and drag your single words from down here over to the color, drag single words to the text, and drag single words over to the size. On the one that says size, go ahead and click measure and then force it to be a count. Okay? And then this will make your single words. I undid mine. This will size your single words based on their frequency. Now, you may want to go through and clean this up again a little bit and remove some of the stop words. For a lot of linguistic purposes, stop words are actually really informative, so it's completely a personal decision about what you're trying to do. All right, once you do that, duplicate it and pick a different president. And, you know, just edit your filter, pick a different president, and it will auto-complete. All right. Finally, the last thing that I've done is created a visualization of the first words. So rather than filtering by president, I filtered by offset. And we can look at that filter here. And I said, just give me the first 10 words. So it was those ones plus this word down here, right? And then that gives the first words, and then I cleaned this up by just, right-clicking and excluding words that I thought were stop words and not particularly informative. All right. The last thing that I did was created a couple of dashboards here. I gave it a title, gave it a little bit of context using text boxes. I like to set it to floating before doing anything, so a couple of text boxes here. Pulled in the first words and the speech length to kind of give the first overview, big picture analysis of this data set. Then drilled down a little bit, again with the metadata, looking at the content words and trying to get a measure of the lexical density of the speeches. And then finally, broke it out by presidents to try to understand each president and how they are different from each other. Okay. And then just put those together as a story in the exact same way that you did before with the baby names tutorial. All right. And then that is it. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. If you have questions about how this data was processed, please, ask me about them. I'd be more than happy to talk about it with you. All right. Good luck and enjoy. For this tutorial, you only need to submit at least 3 visualizations. One must be about the metadata and one must be about the content. And you only have to make 3 and put them into one dashboard. This is just kind of a buffet to give you an overall idea of what's possible and what kind of metrics are realistic. Okay, all right. So you don't need to make 5 or 6 or however many this is. You only need to make 3. All right, enjoy, and I'll see you next week.